Chapter 7 Portal I emerged into a dark cave. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. Jagged walls surrounded me, and the ceiling about 8 feet high looked roughly carved from rock. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Shadows flickered along the uneven walls, cast by torches in iron brackets. Their warm amber glow barely pierced the heavy darkness. The floor was slick and uneven, littered with pebbles and patches of moss. Somewhere in the distance water dripped in a steady rhythm, echoing through the cavern like a heartbeat. Ahead Keenan stood silently, holding up a finger to signal for quiet. I crept up beside him, careful not to slip. He gestured toward a bend in the tunnel. I glanced behind us. Just a dead end. Rieger appeared around the corner, mouthing the word big, and motioned for us to follow. We moved cautiously. When we turned the corner, we froze. A massive troll sat on a boulder at a junction where 3 tunnels converged. He was enormous, his bulk nearly filling the entire space, with a club resting beside him that looked capable of crushing a man in a single blow. His skin was mottled gray, thick and leathery. His eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight. I heard Merrick's voice echo in our minds. "Keenan, if you let him hit me, I will be very upset." Keenan stifled a laugh, despite the towering figure in front of us. "You're a shield. It's your job to get hit and protect me." We both sobered quickly, exchanging uneasy glances. A fight with a troll in these cramped quarters would be brutal. But before we could decide what to do, the troll began to speak. "Frank ain't lonely. Frank promised friends. Frank must guard tunnel. Captain says tunnel important. Frank must impress Captain. Then Captain be Frank's friend. We do friend stuff. That be fun. Frank always wanted friend." His voice trailed off, and we stared at each other in disbelief. Merrick chuckled in our heads. "Oh, this is so much better. You both finally have someone who can match your intellect. If you fight him now, I'll be mad at you for other reasons. Now I'm off to sleep. Enjoy your new friend." Keenan closed his eyes briefly. Rieger leaned in and whispered, "I don't know if I want to kill him unless we have to." I nodded. The troll seemed more like a child than a monster. An extremely dangerous child, judging by that massive club, but still a child. Keenan opened his eyes, sadness etched into his expression. "I detect no evil in him," he said softly. "And I'm with Merrick. He's probably being manipulated by whoever's behind all this." "Wait," said Rieger, puzzled. "Who's Merrick?" Keenan whispered, "Tell you later," then took a deep breath and smiled at us. "Time to turn on the charm." I gave him a reassuring nod. "We've got your back, brother." He nodded confidently, then stepped forward into the troll's view. "Hi, Frank," Keenan said nonchalantly. Frank startled, jumping up and smacking his massive head on the ceiling. Small rocks tumbled down as he rubbed the spot, wincing. "Ow," he muttered, his bulky form nearly filling the tunnel. Seeing the Noctare, he relaxed slightly. Hi," he replied uncertainly. Keenan smiled and walked right up to him. "Hey, we need to talk to the captain. Is he here?" Frank gripped his club tightly, eyeing Keenan with suspicion. "Well, maybe yes, maybe not. You gotta give the password." He stopped rubbing his head and glanced up, eyes squinting as if trying to remember. After a moment he seemed to recall it, then folded his arms and smirked, clearly trying to look important. "Good job, Frank," Keenan said warmly. "The captain will be proud of you for checking everyone. You can't be too careful." Frank beamed, his large face breaking into a grin. Then putting on his most serious expression, he nodded. "That's right, gotta be careful. Captain says bad people who hurt others are everywhere, but I help." Rieger and I exchanged glances, shaking our heads slightly as the surreal scene played out in front of us. "You don't know how true that is," Keenan said sincerely. Thinking quickly, he leaned in and lowered his voice. "So, Frank, which password is it again? I always get them mixed up. Is it the ship one, the island one, or—" He paused, stroking his chin like he was deep in thought. Frank's face lit up. "The back door one for the cave." "Right," Keenan snapped his fingers. "The back door one. So what's the password again?" Frank puffed out his chest proudly. "It's back door." "Of course, the password is back door. Excellent job, Frank. Now you don't have to smash me." Frank laughed, visibly relieved. "Yeah, no smashing. That's good." "Maybe we can even be friends," Keenan added with a grin. Frank's eyes widened. "Really? That would be great. We could do friend stuff, like smashing and helping, and fun. He clapped his massive hands together, the sound echoing through the cave like a distant thunder. "Exactly," Keenan said. "That sounds amazing. And hey, there's a good chance we'll be working together in the future. I think we'll get you lots of friends, with how good of a guard you are." Frank snorted happily and stood up straighter. "Yep, I am a good guard, don't worry." "I'm sure you are, friend," Keenan said, smiling. "Now I've got to go relieve the captain. He's got other stuff to do. But I brought 2 trainees," he added, motioning towards Rieger and me. "They're not ready for the password yet, though, so don't tell 'em, okay? It's hush-hush." Frank nodded eagerly. "Okay, I won't say nothing." Keenan turned to us and waved us over. As we approached, Frank loomed above us with a broad smile on his face. "You trainees do good. Maybe one day you guard hallway with me. But be good to, He looked at Keenan uncertainly. Keenan smiled. "My name's Keenan." Frank nodded, as if he'd known all along. "Yeah, you better follow Chief Keenan. If not, and he asks me to bonk you, I gotta do it. Might save people, you know." Rieger smiled. "Don't worry, we'll be good. No bonking necessary." "Good," Frank said, nodding in approval. "Now I gotta guard. You guys go." We started forward, but Frank wasn't quite done. He leaned down slightly, lowering his voice. "If you see Captain, tell him Frank's still guarding. Still waiting, still good." Keenan placed a hand over his heart. "We will, promise." Frank grinned, then resumed his post, standing tall and proud. As we walked past him, we heard Frank mumble to himself, "I made new friend today. Ha, that makes Frank happy." Then louder he called after us, "Oh, remember, friends, stay out of water." We turned back and thanked him, then continued down the tunnel, exchanging amused glances, the echo of Frank's happiness bouncing off the walls. The tunnel eventually opened into a natural cavern. A narrow bridge spanned a stream flowing from a crack in the stone wall, feeding into a dark, still pool to one side. The water shimmered strangely, almost as if it were calling to us, inviting, clear, and beautiful. Without realizing it, I took a step towards it. Rieger placed a hand on my shoulder. "Careful." Keenan closed his eyes, focusing intently. Rieger added, "The water's moving against the current in some spots. There's definitely something in there." Keenan opened his eyes and nodded. "There's magic in it, but not like anything I've seen before. Let's stay on the bridge and keep moving." Shaking my head as if snapping out of a dream, I muttered, "Yeah, that was wild." We crossed the bridge without incident and followed the tunnel for several hundred yards. Eventually the rough stone gave way to shaped masonry, a stone-lined hallway that looked like it belonged in a castle. The transition was so sudden, it felt almost surreal. The floor beneath our boots was smooth and level. The arched ceiling rose 10, maybe 12 feet high, and the corridor stretched about 20 feet across. Ahead it branched off to the right with a pair of massive double doors standing to the left, reaching all the way to the ceiling. Torches lined the walls, casting a steady, warm glow. We approached the intersection cautiously. As we reached it, we glanced right and saw another hallway with 5 doors, 2 on each side and one at the far end. We decided to investigate, starting with the first door on the right. Inside was what looked like a combination of a mess hall and kitchen. Large wooden tables were scattered throughout the room, and at one end stood a hearth and a prep area. The air smelled faintly of old smoke and dried herbs. Finding nothing of interest, we moved on. The second room on the right was a barracks, an armory. Most of the weapons were gone, but sharpening stones and bunks stacked 4 high lined the walls. A few dented helmets and cracked shields lay forgotten in the corners. We searched the space, turning up a few stray coins, but no useful information. Finally we reached the door at the end of the hall. What waited inside was beyond anything we were prepared for. The room resembled a laboratory. Along one wall stood several hospital beds, their sheets stained and rumpled. The opposite wall was lined with shelves filled with vials, strange chemicals, and glass tubes bubbling with unknown contents. The air was thick with the scent of metal and rot. Standing on one of the beds was a gnome with white hair and yellow eyes, muttering curses under his breath as he flipped through a book, switching languages mid-sentence. His robes were stained with ink and something darker. Above him, stuck to the ceiling, writhed a grotesque mass of flesh. It vaguely resembled a humanoid form, but moved with jerky, unnatural spasms. Its limbs stretched and contracted like wet ropes, and its head, or what passed for one, twitched erratically. The gnome hadn't noticed us yet, but the creature had, and it let out unsettling wet noises as its limb reached in our direction. "I think it might be a flesh golem," Rieger whispered, drawing his bow and melting into the shadows. Keenan gave me a look, shrugged slightly, and said under his breath, "Might as well play the part again." He stepped forward and barked, "Report!" The gnome spun around, eyes narrowing with suspicion before launching into a furious tirade. "Report this, report that. That's all you demons ever want, reports. Well, here's your blasted report. I used the townspeople you gave me to make this," gesturing towards the creature. "Everything was going fine until I tried to make it immune to magical damage. Somehow that spell levitated it to the ceiling, and now I can't undo it. So here I am, stuck and frustrated, and you waltz in demanding updates." Keenan clenched his jaw, forcing a calm smile. "So you used townspeople for this?" "Yes, yes," the gnome snapped, "and they were alive, just like you asked when I started. You lot love causing pain, don't you?" Keenan's smile tightened, his rage barely contained. "So you were forced to do this, against your will?" The gnome let out a bitter laugh. "Forced? Of course not. Why would I be? I enjoy this kind of work." At that he suddenly stopped, his eyes narrowed, and his tone turned sharp. "Wait. Who are you? And why are you here?" Keenan drew his sword with calm authority. "I am Aegis, protector of the innocent, wielder of the bulwark of kings. For the murder of these townspeople, you are sentenced to death." As he stepped forward, the gnome shrieked, "You'll never take me alive!" He hurled a vial to the ground. "Smoke bomb!" he cried triumphantly, vanishing into a thick cloud of smoke. Almost immediately his laughter turned into hacking coughs. "Tear gas!" he wheezed, crawling out of the cloud with red eyes and streaming tears. Keenan stood dumbfounded. As the gnome scrambled into a nearby table, clutching another vial, the gnome pointed it shakily at him. "Not another step, or I'll hit you with this." Keenan paused, raising an eyebrow. "What is it?" The gnome opened his mouth, glanced at the vial, and then hesitated. "Honestly, I have no idea." Still, he held it up like a weapon. Straightening with a shred of regained bravado, he sneered, "Besides, you can't harm me while my creature lives. I bound its life force to mine as insurance." From the shadows a quiet twang echoed, followed by a heavy thud as Rieger's arrow struck the flesh golem. It let out a grotesque cry, but stayed alive, stuck to the ceiling. The gnome waved the vial even more frantically. "Psh! It can't be killed that easily. Stay back, or I'll drink this." Keenan tilted his head. "Why would I care if you drink it?" he asked incredulously. "Because," the gnome snapped, "I'll turn into a bear and tear you to pieces." Keenan glanced at me and shrugged, then dryly replied, "Or you'll turn into a mouse and I'll step on you." The gnome froze, eyes darting. "That's a valid point," he admitted. Then his face lit up. "How about you drink the vial and we go from there?" Before anyone could respond, another twang sounded. Rieger's arrow struck the gnome square between the eyes. He dropped instantly. Above us, the flesh golem let out a final shuddering moan before collapsing, still stuck to the ceiling, now lifeless. Keenan sighed, shaking his head. "I think he reversed the spell. If he dies, the golem dies too." I stepped forward and crouched beside the gnome's body, eyeing the vial still clutched in his hand. "I kind of wanted to know what this does." "Same," Keenan said with a chuckle. Rieger emerged from the shadows, slinging his bow over his shoulder. "He was something else," he said, shaking his head. "That was anticlimactic," I said, smiling. "At some point we should come back through here and figure out everything going on in this place," I added, glancing around the cluttered lab. "But knowing the guy who's working on it, who knows how much of this actually works or even does what it says." "Agreed," Keenan said with a nod. "Let's keep moving." We left the lab and headed for a second door on the left. Inside, several cages lined the walls, each one containing a lifeless body. In the center of the room stood a table with a softly glowing orb resting on it. Rieger sighed heavily. "I was afraid of this." "What is it?" I asked, uneasy, as I stared at the orb. He glanced from the corpses to the glowing sphere. "I think those are soul orbs. They drain the life energy from people and store it. That's how they power their magic, by consuming lives." Keenan shook his head in disgust. "That's horrifying." "Not the way I'd want to go," I muttered, staring at the eerie glow. I couldn't help but wonder how many souls were trapped inside. Keenan, seeing my look, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Best not dwell on it. Let's just make sure they don't make any more of these." "Agreed," Rieger said, stepping back into the hallway. Keenan lingered for a moment, then raised his sword and brought it down on the orb. It shattered with a flash of light and a faint sorrowful cry. We stood in silence. Then Keenan turned and walked out, his voice low. "Let's finish this." We approached the final door, but froze as the sound escaped from the other side. Movement. Instantly we were on alert, weapons ready. Rieger signaled a silent countdown, then threw the door open. Keenan led the way in, followed by me and Rieger. The room was large and dimly lit. A bed stood to the left, a massive desk dominated the center. Behind the desk stood a hulking man at least 7 feet tall with jet black hair and black eyes that locked onto us the moment we entered. To the right, a large mat occupied most of the floor, and on it sat a massive wolf, its head level with mine, even while seated. It watched us without blinking, and poised, waiting for a command. For a moment the air was thick with tension. No one moved. Keenan finally broke the silence. "I am Aegis, protector—" "Yes, yes," the man interrupted with a deep, dismissive voice. "I know who you are. The question is, why are you here? How did you get past the troll? And where is Remy?" He gestured vaguely toward the hallway. "That fool gnome promised me his golem was unbeatable." We tried not to smile at the captain's irritation, but he noticed. His expression darkened as he stood, grabbing a massive greatsword from behind the desk. "You may be amused now," he said with a cruel grin, cracking his neck, "but you won't be in a moment. So which one of you wants to die first?" "Before you kill us," Keenan said calmly, "just one question." The man chuckled darkly. "No promises, but go ahead." "Are you the captain?" Keenan asked. The man's grin widened. Guilty as charged. At that, Keenan pulled something from his pocket and shouted, "Smoke bomb!" He threw it at the captain, striking him square in the chest. The vial shattered, releasing a thick cloud of white smoke. The captain laughed. "You think—" but immediately broke into violent coughing as the gas surrounded him. I grinned. Keenan must have swiped one of the gnome's tear gas vials from the lab. Through his coughing fit, the captain managed to shout a command to the wolf. The beast lunged at Rieger, who dodged just in time. It barreled into me instead, slamming me to the ground. I jammed my weapon in between its jaws as it bit down, shattering my blade. This is it, I thought. Just as the wolf opened its mouth for another strike, I heard the twang of a bowstring. An arrow pierced its skull, and at the same instant, Keenan's sword plunged into its heart. The wolf gave a final gasp before collapsing on top of me with a heavy thud. The captain burst out of the smoke, his bloodshot eyes blazing with fury. He charged at Keenan, swinging his sword. Keenan raised his shield just in time, and a burst of energy erupted on impact, knocking the captain back several feet and stunning him briefly. I struggled to slide out from underneath the wolf's weight as another arrow struck the captain's shoulder. He roared in pain, turned towards Rieger with murderous intent, and kept advancing even after a second arrow hit his other shoulder. Rieger tried to retreat, but the captain caught him by the arm and raised his sword to strike. Before the blow could fall, Keenan's blade burst through the captain's chest from behind. The captain froze, eyes wide, and then crumpled to the floor. We stood there in silence, catching our breath. Rieger looked up at Keenan and gave a weak smile. "It's good to have friends." "Yeah," Keenan said, grinning. "Just ask Frank." I finally managed to push the wolf's body off of me and sat up, wincing. That was intense. Keenan offered a hand and pulled me to my feet. "You held your ground." Rieger nodded. "And you didn't scream. That's progress." I laughed softly. I was too busy thinking about how much I liked my old sword. Keenan glanced at the captain's fallen weapon. "We'll find you a better one." I stood and brushed myself off, and once again, "I am almost useless in a fight," I said dryly. They both laughed. "At least we're okay," Rieger said with a tired smile. "That's what really matters." The adrenaline was wearing off, and the weight of what had just been through started to settle in. We were lucky to have made it out without serious injuries. Keenan exhaled slowly, hoping our luck would hold out just a little longer. We scanned the room, finding letters and correspondence that linked several of the town's traders to the captain's plans. Some notes referred to distant islands, but the most disturbing discovery was a detailed plan outlining how they were using the townspeople to feed the soul orbs. They would then power weapons and portals meant to bring even more demons into our world. Nothing new, I thought grimly. Then Keenan opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out several black stones. The moment I saw them, I froze. Both of them turned to look at me. I let out a slow breath. "I don't know what they are, but these had my uncles rattled." Keenan and Rieger exchanged a glance. Rieger was the first to speak. "If something shakes your uncles, I don't feel good about it." "Me either," Keenan agreed. "We'd better bring them back. Maybe your uncles can tell us what we're dealing with." I nodded, my curiosity rising. What were these stones, and why did they matter so much? "Well," Keenan said, slipping them into his bag, "I guess that just leaves the last room." "Please let it be something helpful," I muttered as we stepped back into the hallway. We walked in silence, the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the stone walls. As we reached the final set of doors, we all paused, each of us feeling the same creeping unease. It was like the air itself was holding its breath. "Maybe it's like Reggie," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Whatever's inside might not be as bad as the outside makes it seem. Keenan chuckled. One can hope. Together we pushed the massive doors. With a creak and a groan, the doors began to open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. It looked like a throne room. At its center, a massive chair, ornate and ominous. On the left side of the room stood a towering statue of a demon, easily 15 feet tall. The room itself was shaped like a sphere, with a domed ceiling stretching at least 20 feet above us. The walls were etched with runes that pulsed faintly, as if reacting to our presence. But what truly made our blood run cold was what lay to the right. 3 portals, identical to the ones we'd seen yesterday, and all active. One reached nearly to the ceiling, while the other 2 stood about 7 or 8 feet tall. All 3 pulsed with sickly energy, drawing power from several glowing orbs arranged on a table nearby. The air around them shimmered with heat and menace. I exchanged a glance with Keenan, and without a word we sprinted forward, grabbing the nearest soul orbs and smashing them on the ground. The moment their connection was broken, the portals began to flicker and fade. But just as we turned to deal with the last largest orb, a massive foot and leg stepped through, slamming into the ground and knocking us backwards. We scrambled to our feet just in time to see the largest creature I'd ever laid eyes on emerge from the portal. He was massive, towering at least 15 or 16 feet tall, with a muscular red-skinned body and radiated raw power and menace. Leathery bat-like wings unfurled behind him, casting monstrous shadows across the room. Glowing yellow eyes locked onto us. 2 jagged horns curled back from his forehead like a crown of bone and fire. In each hand he wielded a weapon, a massive curved sword in one and a heavy hammer in the other, both humming with terrible magical energy. A long barbed tail swayed behind him like a serpent, and his hoofs ground into the stone, as if claiming the ground itself. Smoke curled from his nostrils as he exhaled brimstone and flame, his gaze filled with hatred and hunger, and then he smiled. So, these are the little creatures giving my pawns so much trouble. His voice was deep and thunderous, rumbling up from the bowels of the earth. He sniffed the air, lip curling in disdain. Pathetic. You are nothing. How have you made it this far? I turned toward the doors, but they had closed, sealed shut behind us. Panic surged in my chest. I looked at Keenan, who met my gaze with the same grim determination I'd seen in his eyes when we faced the dire wolves as kids. No escape, no running. I grabbed my axe and a dull sword we'd found in the captain's room, my own sword still shattered, and Keenan turned to Rieger. The 2 exchanged a silent look, one of understanding, of acceptance. It was fun while it lasted. The creature pointed a clawed finger at Keenan. You, he sneered, a paladin, a betrayer. My generals will roast you on a spit for what you've done. Keenan stepped forward, calm and resolute. I am Aegis, protector of the innocent, wielder of the bulwark of kings, and for your crimes against this world you will be judged. The demon paused, surprised by Keenan's unwavering resolve. Then he laughed, a booming guttural sound that shook the very walls. If my men had half your courage, he said, I would have already conquered this world. That's too bad, betrayer. You could have gone far. Keenan raised his weapon. The demon did the same, letting out a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Know that you will die by the hand of Nerithor, world destroyer. He slammed his hammer into the ground. The shockwave hit like a tidal wave of stone and fire. We were hurled across the rooms, limbs flailing, weapons torn from our grasps. I slammed into the wall, the impact driving the breath from my lungs. My vision blurred. Keenan and Rieger crumpled to the floor, unmoving. Laughter echoed through the throne room, deep, cruel, victorious. I tried to rise, but my body refused. Pain shot through my ribs, blood filled my mouth. I coughed, the sound wet and ragged, as the world tilted sideways. Nerithor loomed in the center of the room, his wings unfurled, his hammer resting on the cracked stone, surveying the wreckage with satisfaction, eyes glowing like coals in a furnace. You were warned, he said, his voice low and venomous. This world belongs to me. Your defiance is a whisper against the storm. I reached for my weapon beside me, fingers trembling. Too far, too heavy. My arm collapsed beneath me. Rieger groaned, barely conscious. Keenan didn't move. Nerithor turned towards Keenan's body, raising his hammer once more. The bulwark dies with its bearer, he said, and the light fades forever. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do something, but the darkness was closing in, thick and final. My thoughts scattered, memories flickered. Rieger's laughter, Keenan's stubborn grin, the quiet resolve that had carried us this far. Was this how it ended? Not with triumph, but with silence. The throne room spun. The demon's laughter grew distant. My heartbeat slowed, each thud a fading drumbeat. I coughed again, weaker now. The blood tasted like iron and ash. Narathor's shadow fell over me. I felt the heat of his presence, the weight of his gaze. You should have stayed in the shadows, he said. You were never meant to stand in the light. And then nothing. Darkness enveloped me.